So we've got our transmission repaired. It's back onto the engine and we're ready to put the engine back into the car. A couple of things. The wiring harness, usually like to just secure it around the starter motor. This one's got an aftermarket starter on it, so it looks a little uglier than most. And the same with the backup wiring harness. That should be mounted on that little bracket right there to stop it flopping around. So other than that, we've done some oil leak repairs on the back of the motor, new breather plate gasket, thermostat O-ring. These are the common two leak points and they will run down the back of the motor. Also got a new drive belt that has correct tension on it now and no more cracks. So we should be all set to go. So as I did when I took this one out, I've still got the transmission cross member off. This is not normal. Normally, the factory speedometer cables will have a nut that sits out here. The replacement speedometer cables, the nut is right here. And the only way to really get to them is without that cross member. So that's why I'm putting it in without that one on. Okay, so it's sitting on my jack on my special tool again. I've positioned it underneath the car just kind of roughly, and I'm going to let the car down on it. Then what I want to do is push the front of the transmission up and into the tunnel. You can see the boot sticking through the back of the car. Then we will have to kind of position it around the axles as I bring the car down. Okay, so all I want to do with the axles, we're going to miss right now, but if I just tilt the motor sideways a little bit until this axle drops underneath the starter motor, then I can push it back around. But I'm going to come down a little bit lower still. Okay, once it's low enough to get underneath that starter motor, and we can also start to kind of bring it up, and the front of the transmission will come up first. So if we look all the way up the very front, we can see that our gear shift is lined up with the boot, so I can push it into the front of the vehicle. So when I put my engine mounts in, we can see that we've kind of got one that's pretty close. So I'm going to take my bolt. We've got a washer that needs on the go on the bottom. That washer is going to face up to encapsulate it. And we want to just kind of line up those holes. And then we can come down from the top. On the early cars, the engine mount bracket is not threaded, so we're going to use a luck nut a lock washer and a nut. And we can see the motor's kind of leaning on an angle, which is okay for right now. We'll just bring that. Okay, so we've got the nuts on, the entire nut. We'll tighten them in a little bit. Now normally when I have the cross member on, I'd slide underneath and put the 2 cross member bolts in, but because we don't have the transmission cross member on, I'm just going to carefully let the car down so that front of the engine is sitting against the gear shift nozzle on the transaxle. So now basically everything is just the reverse of the takeout procedure. I'm going to put my axles up, reconnect my main starter line. I'm going to do my speedometer cable and ground connections first. So this connection here, you can see how there's a whole bunch of grime and stuff right there, and this is one of the most important connections in the car. This is our ground strap. I've also put a new one on. You want to make sure you get a wire brush and really clean this connection. This will cause all kinds of problems, from hard start cold to cranking issues, CDI failures, CDI ignition problems, and it is really one of the most overlooked areas in the car. So we're just going to go ahead and hook everything back up and keep moving through. Okay, to line up the transmission, all I do is I just take my screwdriver. You want to be careful you don't damage the threads. And you can see I can kind of move it around pretty easily. Got some grease on my bolts. These are a direct thread into the chassis, so a little bit of grease definitely helps lubricate the bolt. Let the rear transmission mount loose just to make it easier on me. Okay, just got those dipped down. I can take my support board out. Just want to make sure that this isn't rubbing on anything. So one of the most important things that I see neglected is this seal needs to be opened up so one side of the seal is on the bottom and one side of the seal is on the top. This is probably the most neglected part of putting an engine and transaxle back into the car. And you need to make sure you get all the way around, so this is going to continue around here over the back. Some of it we can do from the top, but I want to get as much as I possibly can from the bottom. So for the axles, I've got my long extension with my bolt on it. Just going to flex the axle up. Now you want to make sure that you get all of the bolts started before you do any tightening down, because otherwise if it's off out of alignment you won't be able to get the other bolts in. Okay, I've got them all in and started. And then I'm just going to go around and tighten them in a minute. So the tightening torque on these is 42 Newton meters. So I'm just going to make sure I'm locked in. I'm just going to use a pry bar. And my pry bar is just going to be on the wheel studs, just to kind of stop everything moving. And if you rest your extension against the brake caliper, it'll make it easier to tighten it down. Other than the clutch cable, because I'm going to go ahead and put a new one in, the underside is all connected. I'm going to bring down the car and we'll connect the stuff on top. First thing I want to do, because we just got these in finger tight, always want to make sure the engine is tight first before I go any further. Next, I want to get the pieces of seal that I couldn't get from the bottom, so like along the muffler side of things. We just want to be careful that we don't jab our screwdriver through the seal and damage it. Go ahead and get this out of my way and plug it in. This is our main electrical connection for the car. Just running my fingers along, making sure that the seal's evenly split. The hardest parts to get are going to be here in the corners. You've got to kind of, don't have room for tools, you just got to use your fingers. Often on an older car, this seal back here will be rock hard, and that's something you need to look at while the engine is out. If this seal, particularly at the back, is not installed, the engine will tend to want to overheat because it'll bring hot air from the exhaust straight into your cooling fan. So now I got the back seal in above the muffler. I just want to go ahead and do the same along the back of the engine. On an early car where you can have access, it's obviously a lot easier. On a CIS fuel injected car or a Motronic car, it's a lot harder, and you'll have to do a lot of it from underneath. So that's what it should look like. You see the seal, the bottom part of the seal is on the back side of the tin, and then this top part of the seal will just sit on top. So I'm going to go ahead and re-hook up my CDI boxes. This is a twin plug car, so we got two 6-pin boxes. You want to make sure when you plug these in that they are seated all the way up and in. It's kind of difficult. You got to get the plug orientated just right to be able to plug them in. Hook up our power and tach connection to the vehicle. I want to make sure that this is routed nicely, and I've got a wire clip there. Next I'm going to hook our coils back up. Now on a standard plug car, the coil will be on the engine for most of them, unless it's a pre-70s car, in which case the coil will be off to the side and it'll be just one distributor connection. Okay, this is our cold start fuel injection lines. Just had this hooked through there. And I'm just going to run this up. Plug it in. And then we've got two fuel lines. We've got a fuel return. And our fuel feed. So I've just got those on. I'm going to grab a screwdriver and tighten them up now. Okay, I just want to make sure all my fuel lines are routed safely out of the way. We've got an injection pump drive right here, so I want to make sure that nothing is sitting on top of that. And then I'll come back, we'll tighten the coils. And that's about it for in the engine compartment. We've got to move in and connect the transmission shifter. Got to be careful not to over tighten these, which a lot of people do. Sure that that connection is seated all the way. So normally I'll pull the boot back a little bit, slide the connection in, and then push the boot down. If that coil wire is held off of the connection, it'll create a air gap for it to jump, and that'll result in the failure of the coil and or CDI box. So one of the last items we have is our oil tank breather hose. Got these coil wires underneath the fuel line so they don't get pinched on the air filter. So I'm back inside the car and I'm going to hook up my gear shift. So these use a tapered screw with a 4mm Allen screw. I just want to line that up. So I just want to check that neutral can move all the way through. I can go across and hit my lockout, and I'm just going to first, second, third, fourth, fifth, come out past the lockout and into reverse. So I should have a nice smooth, and it shouldn't feel like there's anything obstructing the gear shift. So on this one we've got some pedal box issues where the clutch pedal is loose. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the whole pedal box out. To do this, I'm just going to pull forward here. That's going to get my gas pedal out of the way. I'll undo this one nut down here. We'll take the box off. We're also going to put in a new clutch cable, so we're going to undo the clevis pin and the clevis fork and pull that all the way out so we can get the old clutch cable out.